Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with the cinematographer. His credits are many and include Guardians of the Galaxy, The King's Man, and the Banshees of Inisherin. We're pleased to welcome Ben Davis. Ben, thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Great. We'd love to start with our first question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Your dad's a cinematographer, so was it always sort of planned that you would go that direction, or did you want to be a dog walker before you found this? What's your story?
No, I don't think it was planned in that direction. What I remember most distinctly about my father's profession was his absence most of the time because he was away a lot. He was working. Yeah, there was a lot of documentary work he did, so he was away for long periods. And it wasn't an intention. I mean, I was always interested in photography. We had a lab. We used to develop and print our own stuff, my brother and I. And so there was always that interest, but it wasn't, I think when you're young, I was young, I couldn't see beyond what I was doing the next day, let alone what I wanted to do for a career, particularly at that age. Life seems infinite, doesn't it, when you're younger, and then it changes as you get older. But
tell me about it.
I was quite young when my parents separated. They separated when I was about 13 and my father left. And then I kind of sort of went into a spiral of things not going so well at school and stuff. But I was kind of saved slightly in a way by skateboarding. I became fanatical about skateboarding. And at one point, that was my... I thought that was my chosen career path. I think at that age, when I was 15, I was getting paid to go and skateboard and sponsored. And I thought... And when I was doing that, I was taking a lot of photographs. My brother and I would always photograph it. And we used to borrow Keith Wilkinson, he was called. He had a place, we used to borrow his Eclair and film on 16mm film skateboarding. So we kept that sort of going. But my father was kind of absent, and would reappear. But then at one point, I was working on a building site, I think, and it was all going slightly wrong. And my father was in America, and he said, look, come out here, come and stay. And he got me onto a film set. He was making a movie out there. And I got on. I was working with the art department and helping the Teamsters. And I think it hit me straight away. As soon as I walked onto a film set, in the first couple of days, it felt like there was a structure to it. I quite liked that. I think for me, because my life had no structure, the structure of a film set and the way there's sort of I guess it's almost like working on a boat or something like that. There's an order to things, isn't there? There's a hierarchy and there's a play, and you understand where you are. And I think I needed structure in my life, and the film set, I found that. And at that point, it was just, this is what I want to do. I want to work in the film industry. And that was in America. And then I came back to the UK, and to not go on forever about this, I came back to the UK and I wanted to get a job in the film industry. It was very difficult at that time because you needed a union ticket. You had to have a union ticket with the ACTT, and you had to have a job to get a union ticket. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, I started working. I worked as a camera assistant at the National Film School on a couple of graduation pieces. Then I got a job as a trainee. I did my first film was a trainee, was actually with Nicholas Roeg, doing a film called Insignificance, and I was the sort of camera trainee on that. And, I loved what I was doing. And eventually I got a job at Samuelson's and got my uni ticket. So that was my journey into the industry.
Were you intending to be a cinematographer, become a cinematographer? Was that your goal at that point?
Not at that point. No, at that point, I just wanted to be working in the industry and in the camera department. And wanted to earn a living, and although I still had a keen interest in photography, it wasn't as if I'd set myself a goal of becoming a cinematographer. No.
How did working at Samuelson's affect you? I mean, it must given you two things: a real grounding in equipment, technical side of the business, but then you must have met a lot of people who are coming in, renting out the gear.
Yeah, there was a lot. It was very busy at that time. I remember Samuelson's. A lot of it was sort of commercial work because films were few and far between, I think, in the UK at that point, but there was a lot of commercial work and there was a lot of crew. You'd camera test with the camera crews when they came in, and there was certainly an eclectic bunch. But I was also fascinated by the cameras. I quite like mechanics. I was quite fascinated by sort of the way things work and how a camera mechanism worked and how it exposed film. Just like now, I quite find like a rotary engine is quite a fascinating thing to look at and how that worked. And I thought the same about cameras, about how the camera movement worked and how lenses worked and how film processing worked and the chemical process. So I was kind of, I really enjoyed that side of it, the sort of science of it. And that was great at Samuelson's because you had all that stuff to learn. They had every camera there was. So I enjoyed that, but I also enjoyed meeting the crews, working with the crews as they came in, finding out what that. But I was never out on set as such. You didn't really get that opportunity to go out when you were there. You worked a shift. I kind of did my 2 years there, and I got my union ticket. You need to do 2 years to get your ticket. And then I was out trying to get work.
Did you ever think about going to film school? I mean, because at the time, this was after I was at the National Film School, but you automatically got an entrance into the union from the National Film School.
Or so they said, yeah.
Yeah, well, it was a bit of a problem. But
well, I did. I worked, yes, because I worked there as an assistant. Before I was working, it was one of the first things I did when I got back from the States was I worked on, I think I did 2 or 3 graduation films. I think Dennis Crossan was the cameraman on one, and I really enjoyed that, and I loved the structure, but I needed to get out, and I'd left home. I was living in a squat at the time, and I needed to earn a living. I needed to. So there wasn't really that option for me, to be honest.
Right.
I didn't, also to get into the film school at that point, I needed to have a sort of a body of work that I could show that would qualify me for entrance, and I didn't have that. So I was coming at it from a very low point. So I just wanted to get out and earn some money. It was pretty desperate for us back then. I was living in a squat, like I said, and I was trying to just survive.
When you did start working, did you start like as a loader and work your way up, or did you come in as a focus puller?
No, I started as a clapper loader. I think my first job was actually with my dad. We went out, and quite a few other people went out to shoot the official film of the 1986 World Cup in Mexico. And that was my first experience, which is a pretty good one, actually.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, not a bad first job. And I was assisting, we shot it all on 16mm, and I was assisting my father, which was a lovely thing I did. It was lovely to work with him. Those memories I'll always hold very dearly. There were sort of 6 DPs, 6 assistants, some of who I'm still friends with now, and who are now DPs. We had the same sort of path. It was a lot of fun. I do remember that. It was a lot of fun. There was also, I think, the DPs, and there was some, this would be familiar to some people, sort of Arthur Worcester and Michael Samuelson and Michael Tony Coggett. There was a whole group of, and they're all characters, to say the least. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, and it was a really good way in.
And I think there's really something to be said for working your way up. I mean, some people come in on different levels, but working your way up, you really know the department really well, and you know the function of everyone. So when you do become a DP, you know what everyone's responsibility is.
Yeah, I think it's really good to be understanding of I worked as a focus puller for a while, but I wasn't a great focus puller. The writing was on the wall there. You're not going to be doing that for any. I did a couple of movies and I did a lot of commercials effects, but I wasn't good. I watched the focus pullers I work with now, and they're so, I find them remarkable. The technicality, the stress of that job and the, particularly, it's very different now. It was difficult then because obviously we didn't have the technical resources they have now with cine tapes and monitors. But I think it's trickier now because there's that sort of precision isn't quite there the way we make films anymore. I did sort of testing and did films, commercials with some of the very sort of, I don't want to say old school because that seems disparaging, but they were focus pullers at the time where, everything would have a mark, the track would be marked, every single foot, the tape measure would be out. Some DPs I work with, they'd have a separate sort of video camera at 90 degrees to the actor, and that would be marked up, and it was difficult. But,
I suppose one of the advantages today, though, is you got playback. So when the director asks or the cinematographer, operator, whatever, asks you if it's sharp, then you can always take a look at it and check if it is or not. But back when it was film and no assist, it was like that responsibility, not only the focus puller but the operator. I think it was a different kind of way of working, wasn't it?
Well, and also I think in the past too, you could get another rehearsal for the focus puller once they've set all the blocking and the actors know what they want to do. But nowadays, if you ask that, it's like, no, we know what we're doing. And there's not that consideration for the focus
just go for it. If it's out of focus, we'll do it again, but then they don't. Anyway.
And I think probably
then you don't, and then you shoot the rehearsal. There is no rehearsal most of the time.
Most of the time,
I find that's the case. There's not a rehearsal, and you're straight into it. And that's why I admire the focus pullers now, because I think it's far more instinctive now.
Yes, I think you have to have that innate talent. And so focus... People see focus pulling as, the steps going up, but it's kind of like saying... After being a banker, you should be a lawyer. Yes, you have to know camera and everything, but you have to have that instinctual focus.
A lot of focus pullers I know are career focus. That's what they do, and they're incredibly good at it. And I did obviously want to become a cinematographer, but one of the reasons I moved was because I was such a lousy focus puller, so it wasn't going to be a long career or a particularly successful one. But then also when I was working as a focus puller, it was when towards the end, the later days of myself, when I was a clapper loader and then a focus, and then as I was a focus puller, I was photographing a lot of things. I would, whenever there was an opportunity to film something, I would film it. I was filming short films, promos, whatever I could. And I would turn down, 2 weeks' work to do a day of free lighting. Because then I realized I had a passion for it. And I actually realized the interesting thing was when I started lighting, I thought, actually, I wouldn't say I found it easy, but I enjoyed it. And I thought, I can do this. I'm actually not bad at this. I may have been a lousy focus, but I know what I like. I think I know how to do this. So it was a different, it was a bit of a relief, really.
Yeah.
Do you think you learned to light that way by yourself? I mean, how did you learn to light? I mean, I find it, it's a big question, really, because do you watch other people, but then it just becomes...
That's always your question. You want to know how people learn to light, actually, and can you learn?
Especially when somebody has a different way, a different sensibility, as you and I do. I mean, our work is different. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. How did you learn? Was it just practice, or?
Well, I worked with yourself at one point, and with.
But you wouldn't have been watching me, I hope. But anyway,
no, I did watch, and with Dick and. God bless him, and many other. I worked with some very, with Billy Williams. I did film as a loader. I did films with Billy Williams and Dougie Slocum, and I watched, but I don't think I was paying a great deal of attention. I mean, obviously, I was aware of what was going on. Particularly, I think when I worked with Billy, and Billy was the first DP I remember seeing who he bounced everything. Everything was soft light, and I hadn't. Seen a lot, and I remember working first with Billy and seeing the way he was doing that. And obviously back then you needed a lot of light. This was when I was a clapper loader because he was working with 100 ASA stock and he was bouncing everything and tungsten light. And there was a lot of poly and a lot of lights, and it was very hot on the set. But it was fascinating to watch what he was trying to do. But I think in the end I just shot a lot and I learnt a lot. I look at it, the interesting thing is I look back at some of the work I did like short films I did when I was very naive. And I look at it and I think, well, that's actually quite good. But sometimes the stuff you do when you don't quite know what you're doing and you're not afraid of what you're doing, is interesting. But then there was DPs I worked with. I do remember working with DPs later on in commercials who would come along and do something, and I would be the folks I'd be watching. They do something. I think, well, what are they doing there? I don't understand what they're doing. It was a really important lesson for me early on in my career. Actually, was to work with someone and they lit something in a certain way. I won't go to names who it was. As DP who came along, and he'd come straight from art school, from the London School of Printing or something, and he lit this commercial with a director I'd worked with, and he listened. And I thought, I don't understand what he's doing. And then we went to Russia's the next day, and I looked at it. And it was absolutely stunning. And I thought, well, the lesson for me then, and I think it's a really important one to carry, is that we tend to fall into a cycle of doing things the way that we know how, a comfort zone, as a DP you fall into, where you want to shoot this is the way I do this. And actually, then someone comes along and forces you into doing something. Always be welcome to always be open to a different way of doing something. I think that's really important.
I think it's particularly good, too, if you're working on a movie that is on the lower budget range and so doesn't have the things that would make it really easy to light it that way, to be able to say, all right, well, how can I get that same effect in a completely different way? And then do it, and you take away from that.
I think it's so interesting for your career. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit, but your career going between the very large kind of Marvel movies or whatever, and a layer cake or
Banshees,
Banshees of Inisherin. I mean, that the sort of difference in scale, and then surely the difference in the process must be quite striking.
Yeah, the process, I mean, in terms of making the choices of what you do, a lot of the choices I've made in my career have been down to circumstance, as well as, I have 5 children, and sometimes the bills have got to be paid. But I do enjoy, the processes. I enjoy the bigger films. I mean, Roger, you've done massive movies. In the end, the goal is the same.
Yeah.
I think the challenges are different. I think I enjoy both processes. I don't think they're radically different. They're just on a different scale. Right. The smaller movies, I think you have a stronger voice creatively than you do on the bigger ones, which I enjoy. I do get asked that quite a lot, what the difference is, and I never really quite know what to say. I mean, an example I give of it was I was doing, I think it was Avengers, and we were shooting in this beautiful old school which had a quadrant in the middle, and you couldn't get access. You couldn't get a vehicle into the quadrant because there was a small gateway. And I wanted a light, and there was a staircase with a glass window at the end of it that led down from the quadrant. And I wanted to get a light through this window. Because I was with my gaffer, and I said, I really would like to backlight that window. And he said, oh, we'll do that. And then it's one of those things, where it's like, where you're in that position, you say something on the offhand, and then I came back the pre-light day, and there was this massive crane lifting a 300-ton crane lifting a scissor lift over the top, the roof of this building. And I said, what's that for? And he said, well, you said you wanted to backlight. So they put the scissor lift in there, and I put I think it was a 20K on it or something. And I put it in the window, and then I looked at it and I thought, no, I don't like that. Oh dear. But I suppose I know that's a waste of money. You don't want to waste money. I try not to waste money on obviously lighting budgets, but it's just an example of. It wouldn't have even crossed my mind to even attempt it on something
right
on a lower budget. And I do think the challenges of low budget shooting are really interesting. For instance, when I've been on films before where you can't afford to get a crane. You're trying to do moonlight at night, and how do I create effective moonlight, which is incredibly difficult on any location to create. I don't know what you feel about this, but I think it's one of the most difficult things to create.
It is. I think it's the most difficult.
Moonlight that looks like moonlight. Looks like... Because I go outside and there's a full moon in my garden, and I look at it, and I live in the forest, and I look at the way the light behaves. And I think, well, how do I? Such a difficult thing. It's such a particular look. Yeah. You get into situations on a low budget movie where you can't get a crane, so you've got to put lamps on the ground, and you go, how am I going to make this work? And I think they can be really interesting. I'm always impressed, when it comes to award season and you're sort of voting for awards, I'm always impressed with watching a film and I think, well, that's beautifully done and that's really well executed, and yet knowing that they've had no resources is always kind of an interesting, because the general public obviously generally aware that, they only made that in 5 weeks and they had like $4 million to make that movie.
Right.
And yet, look at it, it's amazing.
Somebody else could have put up 16 scissor lifts and never got the lamp in the right place because they had so much money it didn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Because I think we all, here's the thing. I remember a friend of mine was talking to Billy Williams, and he was saying that Billy Williams was in an interview and said, if you were going to do it all again, what would you do slightly differently? He said, I would have used less lights. Yeah. But I think we all, sometimes we all tend to put up too many lights and then you end up switching.
Yeah.
I always think that when you've lit a scene,
Yeah. There was a wonderful thing James Wong Howe said very well to the end of his career. He says, my goal is to light is strip down the number of lights I use. I've just done a set and I've used 10 lights, where in the past I might have used 60. But I want a few more years so I can get down to 1. I thought was, I think maybe we're all trying to do that in some ways, sort of kind of cut to what really is important,
Yeah, I think so. I think an exercise whenever I like to, whenever I've lit a set, is to just go through it. Okay, well, it's easier now when if you've got someone with you with a dimmer board, you say, all right, let's just go around the lights and switch them. Let me see what that light's doing. Mm-hmm. Let me see what that light's doing, because and just switch them off one by one until you kind of because usually I find there's one lamp there, and I think, well, I'm not sure if that's serving any purpose at all, and let's get rid of it.
I think one thing that you notice is when you're tired, you tend to overlay light. Yeah. So if you're tired.
I think that's a true thing. It's stress and tiredness. On a film, you feel pressured, and especially when you're shooting film emulsion. I would always overlight late in the day. It's frustrating.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think all DPs would tend to do that. I think so, because there's with film, there's the stresses of film. Because it's different. That's what I find interesting about now with film, where it was before, when I used to shoot film a lot, it was always about I'm talking before DI and before digital projection, etc. It was all about getting a thick negative. It was all about getting a printer light, getting your printer lights up in the mid to high 30s if you could, sort of getting them there. But I think the whole way of exposing things has sort of kind of changed. There's a lot of people I know who are like shooting film and then underexposing it and then pulling it all back up later to pull the grain out. And it's just, I haven't shot film for a while, so I don't know if I'd go to that extreme.
I would.
I think also that people coming up now that only know digital don't know exposure as well, because in film, you didn't have that kind of latitude. And if you weren't right, it would show right away. In digital, it doesn't show right away unless you're trying to do something in visual effects. So down the road, it will show. So far better to get it right to begin with. But I've seen so many examples in post houses of people that just aren't right on the exposure and don't even realize it. Or in one case, when I was involved in it, I was trying to be kind and said, your exposure's not quite right. He goes, yeah, but it looks okay, right? But it was all going into visual effects. He said, so it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Is that been, for you think, the biggest change in your career, moving from film to digital? Or what else has sort of changed? Has your way of lighting changed very much?
I think so, yeah. I think the way I light has changed. I've learned, I don't think you stop learning at all. I don't know if maybe, I love the digital format. I have no problems with shooting digital whatsoever. I really, I like the fact that with digital, I always felt that when you were shooting film, the best results, I remember shooting things on cross-process and bleach bypassing. I always felt with film, some of the best result, or underexposing or pre-flashing, always when you shot with film, when you pushed it to its limits of where you exposed it as well, where am I going to put, where do I want black to be and where do I want to lose information at either end of its latitude? I always felt when you were pushing up against those borders that you were getting the best results, from film, when you weren't being safe with it, when you were taking the risks. And what I do like about digital is that those risks you could push up against those boundaries much harder because the risks aren't there. Does that makes any sense?
Yeah. You don't have sleepless nights wondering if the lab's going to call you in the morning and say, "What the hell did you do?"
Because I think you can really push into that, and you can say, right, I just want to be able to see that. I almost want that to be black, but and I do enjoy that. And I've been doing a lot of stuff recently. We're going to, I'm just doing some tests on it here now, of going to negative after the first DI pass, then go to negative and back into the DI. And I really, there are some things that I miss about film. It's like the way hard edges and highlights are digital. And it really, I'm really liking the way that affects that.
How much time does it add to the post process to do that?
The last time I did it on Banshee, we did a 2 week sort of DI. And then we went out to a negative, and then which took about 3 days, and then it came back into the DI, and it took 2 days, 2 days more grading afterwards, just to sort of do any sort of trims or bits and pieces where we didn't like what it had done. But it was, so it didn't add a lot, and it wasn't particularly expensive. So, I think it's very doable. And I think a lot of the labs are I know Photochem and CineLab over here have been doing quite a bit of work with that sort of process. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying that at the moment. I'm sort of doing tests with sort of going out to Ektachrome and back again. I'm not sure whether it's going to work. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I the look is really interesting. So
what would be the difference in that going out to Ektachrome than going out to negative?
It's higher contrast. You get a very deep black, and it also saturates the primaries more. So it's got a nice, it's quite grainy. It's got a very, how can I give an example? 70s sort of William Eggleston kind of feel to it. It's rather lovely, yeah. I don't know whether it's right at the moment, but and I think it needs a little bit more work about how you deliver what's going to it, how much grading you do before it goes there,
Right.
What you don't want to do is go really contrasty and go sort of, and then go into a thing that's really So we're just trying to find out the best way to do it at the moment.
You were talking about the difference between, a lower budget film like working with Martin McDonagh or doing a, Captain Marvel or a larger film. How is it, and you say one is a little bit more personal for you. I mean, how do you work, say, on Banshees? Were you operating on that film? Do you ever operate? Because you started off operating, didn't you?
On the bigger films, the Marvels, I won't operate because there's usually multiple cameras and I'm trying to sort of keep control of those. On Banshees, I operated the B cam. I would operate usually when I shoot, like with Martin, for example, it's a 2-camera shoot. And I think most shots will have 2 cameras. Not always. Actually, that's not true. I'd say 60% of the shots are 2 cameras. And I will operate the B camera whenever I can, because I do love to be behind the camera. Still, I don't enjoy it as much digitally as I did when it was film. I think the problem was when it was film, I used to light through the eyepiece. So I wanted to operate because that's how I would set my lighting, through a ground glass, But I mean, the truth is, for me, is that my operator, or the operators that I use, there's a couple of operators, they're better at it than I am. If I'm going to be honest, they're better operators than I am. And, I get a bit rusty. I'm not supple as I used to be. And they're just a little better. Now, sometimes, if it's a very personal scene, or I think it's a big performance moment, I will, and I think it needs to be, I need to be there, so it's not going through a third party. It's not sort of communicated through to, it needs to be more instinctive. I will operate if I think I have a better understanding of it. And I do love operating. And it is sometimes like, if I feel it's a particularly important shot and I need to be there, I need to be very close to what's going on, I'll operate. What I don't like is to be removed from the process. I don't like being in the DI, in the DIT tent. When digital came around, we'd spend a lot of time, when it first started, because I didn't have a particularly great understanding of it, you would spend time in the DIT tent, and then you'd spend time fiddling around. That is something I don't do anymore. I try to have a monitor on set, right, if I'm not operating, right by the camera, is to have a monitor that I can see, and then I'll have a radio communication with the DIT if I need to, but generally just to work with a LUT, and that's it, and light to that, and not go in the tent unless it's something very particular that I want to. So I don't want to spend my life on set in a black box particularly.
So then on the larger films, again, say on Avengers or Guardians, I mean, are you more at the DITs then? You say multiple cameras. How are you controlling what is being shot, or how is your input being given to the other operators and your gaffer? What's that kind of process like?
Well, with the gaffer, it's much easier. With the cameras, if there are multiple cameras, I'll generally have a talkback system. I'll have a headset system where I can communicate with them. I still think as a DP, I want control. There isn't a camera going in there unless I think it can go there. They're not I still need that sort of control of what's going on and where cameras are pointing. Yeah, I think obviously the talkback systems are great for that sort of work. The gaffer will usually shadow me, and I'll be in constant communication with them. It drives you to the monitors. That's the problem, I think, on those bigger shoots. When you do it, when you have got multiple. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm operating a camera and there's two other cameras, I may have set them up and they're shooting, important shots in the film. I get very nervous about that. I don't have an overview of what's going on. That I'm not looking at those and setting the exposure where I want it, tweaking the shot if it needs to be, So that's difficult. Like I say, it can drive you into the DIT tent, which is what I'm always trying to avoid.
I've always sort of avoided it, really. Except on 1917, where we had to be on a monitor. But usually, see, I've been very lucky, I suppose, in one way. I've mainly done single camera shoots. And it's really been that way for the most part, even on the larger films I've done, I guess I don't like that big, complicated kind of setup with lots of people. I get very flustered. So I kind of very much like to be behind the camera myself, and I like everything to be quite intimate. So. Well,
you can also make that particular shot be the best that it can be, but oftentimes with multiple cameras, you do have to compromise.
Yeah, I think you do, but it's not even about that. I think it's more about a kind of personality thing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think there is. James has got a point there. I do think that every camera, there's a level of compromise to every camera you put in beyond the A camera.
Yeah,
and there is that. I do think filmmaking now is just one series of compromises. In a way, you start out
as soon as you pick up a camera.
Yeah, right. It's the biggest thing people have to learn. Yeah.
And it is, and it's just where you make them, I suppose, is the key thing. Is well, I'm not going to compromise. I'll compromise on this, but I refuse to compromise on that. Choosing where you draw your line.
Yeah.
Do you find sometimes if you're working with 4 cameras that sometimes a shot would be fine with 2 angles, but because you've got 4 cameras, you've got these 2 extra angles that you wouldn't normally even consider taking an angle of, but you got the camera there, so you might as well shoot it. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, it does. But I must admit, for me personally, once it gets beyond 2, I struggle a bit. I can do the 2, and then you get to 3 or 4. I mean, obviously, if you're shooting a battle sequence, with like 400 extras, you could throw a lot of cameras at it, and if you get a piece of magic, well, those cameras is wonderful. But if it's a sort of a 2-hander, an important piece of dialogue, I think once you go over 2, it gets. I think, again, it's a level of compromise. Each extra camera that goes in is a compromise of some sort. Now, sometimes, if you're dealing with a particular circumstance where you've got actors who are going to be great in the at the very beginning, or you need, and you need to cross shoot, or you're someone, cross shoot, or you have an actor, God bless them, who doesn't do the same thing twice. Sometimes you have to cross shoot, because otherwise you can't edit the material. I do think that was another that was quite interesting for me. Is that early on in my career, I was shooting, and we were shooting away on a film, and then we had a great editor, and I went and sat in with the edit. Sitting in with an editor is a really good thing to do, I think, as TV, And he was cutting together a couple of scenes that we'd shot, and one of them was an example of that, where we'd shot one angle this way as an over shoulder, and then we'd shot the other direction as an over shoulder. They were 2 young actors, and he was trying to cut them together, and he was saying, "I'm having a problem with this," and I was saying, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, in the foreground here, so the guy who was shoulder we were over was doing something different, and then you cut round to the reverse of his line, and it didn't cut." And it was just really, and then I thought, oh, it's quite interesting spending time in the edit room. You learn quite a lot about where you went wrong. So spending time in an edit room is I think is a really good exercise. Editors don't always want you there looking over their shoulder, but sometimes to go in and just say, "Oh, how's it going? Can you show us that scene? Are you struggling with that? What's wrong with that scene? Why is it proving difficult?" It's a really interesting thing to do.
But that brings me to the point about, how do you set shots? I mean, how do you work with Martin McDonagh or with Matthew Vaughan or something? I mean, film in pre-production, do you do storyboards, or do you do blocking rehearsals with actors, and how generally do you work?
Well, I think it's usually down to the director, and every director I work with is different. Martin storyboards. He does these very, I shouldn't laugh at them, but very basic drawings of like round heads with little eyes on them. And for mostly every shot. Now, when Martin didn't do that on the first film we did, but he did it on the last, he particularly did it on BANSHEES. And at first I thought, well, they're a guide, these storyboards. But then I went through the boards with it. We spent time together, went for every scene and every board on that film. And I realised that the storyboards, Martin's quite a particular writer. He has there's something about the way that Martin writes. There's like a sort of Beckett-esque kind of thing, And then I realised that the storyboards were actually, some of the shots I think, well, what is that shot? What are you doing there? And I realised that the storyboards were as unique as his writing, and they were shots that I would never normally have thought of doing, but they were rather wonderful and funny and kind of, oh, you want to shoot from there? And I realised that those boards were really important because they were his voice. That's not always the case. I do like a blocking rehearsal. I do like that way of doing things where there isn't a structure, and you get the actors in and you rehearse and you allow them to express themselves. I like watching actors work.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Enjoy that process.
Sometimes they do something you never would have thought of, which then brings all these interesting shot ideas to your head that you wouldn't have necessarily had if you were just looking at the script beforehand and thinking, oh, we could shoot this angle and that angle. But when you actually see them in the set and you see how the set interacts with them.
There's something also a bit more risky about it, I think, in a way, because what if you can't figure it out?
What if it doesn't come to
I remember one of the first films I did with Mike Radford, 1984, we would spend hours and hours rehearsing and working out what the shot was. It was just a wonderful process. But I've also enjoyed storyboarding as long as I have some sort of input in that, rather than just be given a set of boards and walk on set,
Yeah, but the way films are scheduled nowadays, you cannot have hours and hours of rehearsal.
No, I don't think we could do that today. No,
yeah, you've got to get your page count in.
But I do like that thing of where you do get also what I love about the rehearsal and blocking out is the actors' involvement in it. Mm-hmm. That it's there is something wonderful about that process. Okay, let's work this out. I usually find it best it works if the director goes in, he's got a general idea of what he feels it should be. This is and he gives the actor like a sketch of. So I think you come in and you're kind of I think you're over here somewhere and they're thinking, and I think at one point you come together or whatever a very loose idea, and then you just give it to the actors and you do it a few times and then they relax it. There's something lovely about it. I do get most of my kicks now watching actors, good actors work. I do love that part of my job, being there right at got the best seat in the house and you're watching really good. I do love that.
Do you ever get unstuck because you have a blocking rehearsal on a set that the actors are on for the first time, but you might have pre-lit it with something in mind?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Any specific example, please?
I don't know if I can get. I just know that I've been on sets sometimes where you walk on. So I've been in. Normally I love to get in. I get in early, and I've either pre-lit or set or I'm in early. If it's a location, I'm getting it ready. So you'll get it ready and you'll go, all right, look, this way the windows there is beautiful. You've got this little 3/4 backlight, and the director will turn in and walk in, turn around the other way, pointing exactly the completely opposite direction. You go, oh, Christ. And then you can gently try. Do you think maybe we'll come around? Do you think it might be better? It's that sort of negotiation in blocking, isn't there? When you're blocking something, you think, oh Christ, that is really not. That's going to make things very difficult.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I can't. I don't think I'll give you a particular example. It almost happens every film, doesn't it? I mean, where you oh, this wasn't quite how I saw it.
Yeah. I've often found that I watch a blocking rehearsal and I always sort of go to where I think the main angle is, And there's one director I've worked with who would always look at me and think, why is he standing over there? And he'd end up kind of standing next to me, and that's where the camera would go. It's really a kind of nice little process, a little dance, I would refuse to move, and it was like, you come over here.
I'm staying. No, that's what I do. I always stand where I think it should be shot.
Yeah.
One thing I always do is there was a certain director, actor I worked with who had been doing it a long time and knew exactly where technically he would walk on the set and you'd look around and go, where's the key light? And he'd be looking about. So say you had a room with 3 windows or 1 window in it, he would go and go, well, I'm going to look, this is the way I'm going to go and stand there in the backlight. So I knew he would. So I always knew where he was going to go, and he was like the star of the show. So if I wanted the scene to be a certain way, I would get there with the gaffer. I'd say, well, I'll switch over those other 2. Just put that one on. And knowing that he would go and stand where I wanted.
Wow, that's a great trick.
That is a good trick. Wow.
Yeah, I won't say the actor. But he was very aware of where the key light was and where he wanted to stand and where he might look good.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, you could manipulate it slightly like that.
What do you remember as the biggest challenges starting out? I mean, you started out, one of the first films of yours I saw, I think, was Layer Cake with Matthew Vaughn directed and stuff. What do you remember about starting out? Was it terrifying becoming a cinematographer? I mean, it was for me. I know that.
Do you know what, Roger? No. I was very comfortable. From the beginning, I was very comfortable in the role. I did a lot of shooting. I'm trying to remember a time where I was, obviously, the first day of the film, you're always a bit on eggshells and nervous. But I don't think I was. I was sort of, in a way, ignorantly confident.
Right.
Blissfully ignorant is what I would say about what could go wrong. So, particularly then, I wasn't. I mean, when I shot Layer Cake, I'd been shooting commercials for 3 years non-stop, So
right.
I'd exposed to, I wasn't particularly, but I was, with lighting, I don't really get nervous about it anymore at all. Thank God, I'm got myself lucky about that.
God, that's a nice way to be.
Yeah. I've had times, obviously, when shooting negative, where I'd go and they'd say, "Oh, this is going to be all right." I was doing a film with, doing my first film with Dino De Laurentiis. In Italy, and he would come to, we'd do projected brushes in the morning, and he'd sit behind me with a stick, and he would go, we had some night stuff, and he'd hit you on the shoulder with his walking stick. It's too dark. It's too dark. You cameramen, you always make a night dark. God bless him. He was in his late 80s and had cataracts. I don't know if he could tell whether it was dark or light.
Oh, right.
I was looking at thinking, it's so dark. What's he talking about?
Do you think that it's important for a cinematographer? Well, you did say this, going in and talking with the editor, to know cutting, and so to be thinking about the cut as you go through the day, because oftentimes at the end of the day, suddenly there's not enough time for the 7 shots that you had planned. So as a cinematographer, do you feel it's also your responsibility to go, well, actually, these 2 shots are necessary, and push for those 2 shots to make the cut?
Yeah, I think you have to know how things are going to cut together. You need to be able to see things in pictures. You need to be able to see the cut. I think it's vitally important. I think that's your job as well, because you don't expect necessarily your director to know it. I've worked with directors who can't see that. Directors who can, and don't expect your operator necessarily to. Yes, I think as the DP, you need to be able to see the cut. You need to know what shots you need to make a scene work and how a scene cuts together. I think it's very important.
And what the cutting style is going to be, because sometimes it's kind of staccato, and so they're not looking necessarily for moving shots or whatever. The style that they create, I think it's a good thing to know that while you're shooting, to be able to supply the editor with what they need.
Well, that's also interesting how a style is settled on. You talk about
if it is
Martin doing thumbnail storyboards, but it's still about pacing, isn't it? It's still about, well, is this film going to be held in wide shots and the characters are going to move across the frame, or is it going to be, is this scene more cutty? How do you have conversations with a director about what the film, like Banshees, what did you talk to Martin about in terms of that? Because that's a very particular film where that island is very much a character. It's just as much a character as the actual humans.
Yeah, that film's about isolation, so it needed to have images that show that isolation, and that, but also they needed to have it's like isolation and claustrophobia in the same. The film has those 2 extremes are on the same place. We generally with Martin is different. We had a very lucky thing on that where not lucky because it was during COVID, and we had to isolate in a house together for 10 days before we could go on the island. And so every minutiae of the film was discussed. Before that, I take, for example, a film I've just completed, which was only with a great director called Simon Stone. And he came into the thing, and it took us a while to get there because I didn't have much time with him prep. But he wanted this very flowing kind of, where the camera doesn't move, it was all handheld, and one character's shot would become another character's shot, and things would flow on. There was very little cutting in it, and it took a while to get there. But it was a very different style. But we didn't really arrive at that style, I don't think, until the first couple of days of shooting, where it became clear to us exactly what it was going to be. There was conversations about it beforehand, but it wasn't clear to me. To be honest. I really kind of got it after a week, I would say. Fortunately, the first week went well, but then I kind of understood. It took me that long to understand what he was trying to achieve, because I hadn't done that before. But it did take a while because it wasn't. I was out of my comfort zone, and there's something about being out. It wasn't a way that. So I'd go into a scene. I think, well, we shoot the white, and then we'll come in and cover it like this, and maybe track behind this. And it wasn't that at all. It was, and the way that it was blocked was far more of a general idea. Okay, I want to just shoot now, and the camera wanted to be at a point in whatever direction it needed to go, which was quite challenging lighting-wise. Which is another thing I had to. But I was completely out of my comfort zone, and so for the first week, I found it incredibly difficult. But then, because we were shooting on a boat, we wanted to. At sea, and we wanted to point in every direction at night, and there was nowhere to fix anything, So it was just a different exercise with me, people walking around with lights, and it took a week, and I was, I found it very difficult for the first week. But then once I understood it, the challenge of it became enjoyable. I suddenly thought, oh well, I wasn't in my comfort zone. I had to really, really think about every single moment and how I was going to execute. And I really enjoyed that.
It must have also affected the blocking, because if they were in the wrong place, you can't join the two shots. The two conversations.
Yeah, but then there was the idea that you just adapt the shot. So so when you're doing that, you've got boom swingers diving out of shot, people scrambling around to get out of the shot. It was, I've done a couple of films like that have worked like that now, where they're very. They're very organic and handheld, and it'd be, okay, we're pointing this way, and then suddenly you're pointing that way. And they are particularly challenging. I was going to ask about, because we're talking about digital, because I was thinking about how in a situation like that, I'd have everything back to a little dimmer board, and I'd be cross-fading lights trying to make it all work. As the camera pan, I'd be taking one light down, bringing that. And iris pulling. That's one thing I love about digital, is the fact that the control of the iris on the camera and what you can do with that. Because it was always very difficult with film, because it was guesswork, because you had no video. So you do an iris pull. Say someone walked into a room from outside and there was a 3-stop or 2-stop pull. It was so hard to execute those convincingly on film. But I do love that in digital now. I'm always riding iris, which I think is a lovely thing to be able to do, because you could see it.
Right. And also you're saying about also the lighting as well. You can ride the lighting, because when you were using tungsten, that color would change if you wanted to shift the density, the brightness of a lamp. But now with LEDs, you've got so much control over the intensity of the light as the camera moves around a set,
Yeah, I did go wrong with that early on with tungsten lights, when sort of the iPad dimming idea, when everything went back to one control on a big set we were shooting on. I think it was on Stardust, and I had a lot of lamps up in the reds and stuff, and I had control of all of them, and then I realised afterwards that the color temp, when I got to grade it at the end, colour temperature was a bit all over the place, because you obviously think you could say, oh, we could put a scrim in that lamp, but let's just dim it down,
right?
And also your eyes because how the human eye adjusts. I would be getting warmer and warmer, but my eyes would be neutralising it,
right?
And so and then I get to see the print. I go, well, that's a bit warm, that, and you've got to get your cut. I guess then I should have had my colour temperature meter out of it more.
You don't see them very often now, colour temperature meters. I know some DPs don't even have a regular meter, but there you go.
I'll ask you that, Roger. Do you still, when you're shooting digital, do you use a meter still? Do you use your instant meter? You do?
Yeah. I do. Yeah, very much. I maybe don't use it quite as much, and obviously I refer to the monitor, the DIT's monitor, but I never, that was a thing for me, changing from film to digital. I didn't change the way I worked at all. I didn't, the first time what was it, In Time, the first time we shot digital, I hardly looked at the DIT's monitor, really. I mean, I'm not somebody that tweaks on set. I was just going for the exposure like I would be shooting film.
But was that brother with Art? Was that
film?
That was film.
That was film, was it?
Yeah, that was.
So what was your first digital?
In Time, and then
In Time
was a film I did before Skyfall. So Skyfall, in a way, was the first big film I did digitally.
Okay.
And again, there it was. Most of the time, it was just reassuring myself that I wasn't shooting, off the scale.
But one of the things that we really like, because we make sure that there are a couple of P3 monitors on the set, calibrated, absolutely calibrated. What we like is you can show the director, this is what I'm thinking of, because to one director, dark means one thing. To another director, it means quite a different thing. There's the story of telling a director in film or once that these people are going to be in silhouette. Is this okay? Yeah. And then going to dailies and the director saying,
it was a long dialogue scene. It was just
you can't see their faces.
Full shot in silhouette talking. I said, well, let's just do it in silhouette in the doorway.
So it's nice to be able to say, this is what it looks like. You signing off?
Yeah. I find that really nice, that whole mystique of the black box and film and, the nobody knowing but the cinematographer. I find all that kind of nonsense. I love digital and I love having the monitors on set. And I love what you're talking about, the way you can be more fluid with the camera. I mean, we couldn't have shot 1917 on film. It would just never have happened. So there's sort of things you can do with it. What that does kind of annoy me sometimes is it's like, because you have a Technicrane or you have all this wonderful technology, you don't have to use it. And I feel so much these days, the shots are about just showy shots because we've got this great technology. They're not about what the story is. Which where your work on something like Banshees is really great because you've done all these big films with this huge amount of technical backup and skill sets and all these great people you work with. But then you do a film like Banshees and it's really, really about what is the story? Who are the characters? Where are we? What's really important to see in this shot,
I mean, with having all the a lot of times I found that you're forced into certain ways. I don't know whether you've had much work with pre-vis. Pre-vis, obviously on a lot of the big Marvel films, there's a lot of pre-vis. And I find that very difficult because a lot of the pre-vis stuff comes to you. You haven't been involved in it. And they hand you these shots and you look at the shot and you think, well, what's this shot about? It's just, it serves no purpose other than, wow, look at that shot. But it says no purpose to the storytelling or the script. And so a lot of times I do find with pre-vis, I have quite a difficult relationship with pre-vis and how it works and its origination. Because sometimes I don't even think the director's involved in originating the shots. They're coming out of a pre-vis department, and I don't even know what. So I've struggled with that.
Well, and what happens too is everybody regards pre-vis as the Bible. And so production design is working around this image that was never thought through. And so by the time you actually have to shoot it, everything's sort of locked in stone around a shot that wasn't a good shot to begin with. May have
visual
shown
effects
everything.
have started work on it,
Right.
We've already started work on this shot, and you think, well, why?
The machine is rolling on, and you can't really
get out of the way.
I think it's the same with some directors that hire a storyboard artist to storyboard the film, but they don't have any input. So as a storyboard artist, creating all these shots, but doesn't really bear any relationship to what the director has in their head or the cinematographer, which I've come across, and it's kind of frustrating. But pre-vis, I agree with you. It's I'd rather just have drawings. You can change them more easily.
And then they'll use like a 62.5 millimeter lens. But I want that look.
I've had pre-vis where you go and they say, well, can you give me the tech vis on that shot you just done? I said, well, at the moment, the camera's going out of the studio wall by 15 feet, And you think, I'm not sure we can do that unless we're going to dig it, unless we're going to knock down the studio wall. We can't do that shot.
Right. Where do you see that going, actually? I didn't have in our notes here about asking you about, the way films are going and that, and the use of AI in filmmaking. I mean, pre-vis is one thing, but how do you see all that going? I mean, it seems like we've done a lot of work in animation over the years, and it seems like the disciplines are really kind of coming together. I mean,
AI, we can't avoid it. It's obviously going to... some of the AI tools that are being used are very useful. It slightly terrifies me, AI, because I don't think at one point you're not the beneficiary, you're the subject. And I worry about that. There are people I know who are great graphic designers and concept artists who aren't getting the work that they should be getting because it's been done by AI and not particularly well. So I worry about AI. I do think there are tools now. I've been in a DI suite all day. There are tracking tools and facial tracking tools that are AI based, which are amazing, which are really helpful. But I'm not sure. It frightens me slightly. If they become tools for us to use, but if you start originating content or scripts on AI, then I'm slightly worried for us all, really. For society in general.
But also just in a straight technical sense, you could flat light a set and then you could light it in a computer any way you want. I mean, that can be done now. God knows how well that will be done in a few years. I mean, do you see that as something that you would embrace or run away from, away to an island somewhere off Ireland?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I think I'll be retired by then. I hope. That's been, I think that's been, I think undoubtedly that will happen. And it'll be, you'll walk on. I think you'll get to a point where there'll be a lot of cameras mounted on the walls on a set and the shots will be constructed as well at some point. I like to think that as human beings, we'll hold on to what is good, and that. But I love the fact there's still a desire for people to listen to a record player on vinyl and, because I think we'll always still hold on to those things. I hope so. I am very wary of AI and what it might, and the impact it will have on the film industry. Yeah, I'm very skeptical. Yeah, and afraid for our industry. So, I genuinely am.
So then, just to follow from that, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be you? No, somebody looking to go into film and is interested in visuals and visual storytelling.
Bearing that in mind, I think there'll always be. I like to think there'll always be room for artists in some way, and I think if you want to be my advice would, I forget asking if someone who wants to be, just shoot whatever you can. The lovely thing about now, if you're a young filmmaker, it was very difficult because I used to try and, my brother and I used to try and shoot things when we were like in our teens on 16 mil, and then you'd have to try and beg someone to process it for you, and then you had to try and to cut it was virtually impossible, and it was almost impossible. But now I do think that's wonderful. To shoot your own material is pretty straightforward now. The editing tools, the equipment. You can do it on your phone, but shoot whatever you can. I think the best way to learn how to work in the industry or in the creative world is to do it as much as you can.
Yeah,
shoot whatever you can.
It's been great.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks,
it's been so nice. So nice swapping things. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for doing this. This
my pleasure.
Been really,
it's been great.
Pleasure. I hope I wasn't too boring.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.